In the crystalline heart of the Galactic Council's Grand Chamber, Ambassador Diana Reeves stood before the assembled representatives of 5,000 civilizations, her silver-streaked hair and weathered diplomatic uniform reflecting the shimmer of 1,000 stars through the chamber's transparent dome. The council had gathered for what they called an emergency session, though Diana knew it was really an execution, the diplomatic kind. Supreme Counselor Vex, his serpentine body coiled around the ancient throne of judgment, fixed all 7 of his eyes upon her. Ambassador Reeves, you stand accused of persistent violation of council protocols, disregard for established diplomatic procedures, and the grave offense of introducing informal elements into official proceedings. Diana didn't bother hiding her smile, which only seemed to agitate the assembled delegates further. The Proximan representative, a being of pure energy contained within a ceremonial crystalline vessel, flared with indignation. She authorized a trade agreement over what they called coffee. No formal declarations. No ceremonial bindings. Just beverages and conversation. Which has resulted in the most profitable trading quarter in Proximan history, Diana pointed out calmly. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, knowing she spoke the truth. That is precisely the problem, thundered Vex, his scales flickering with iridescent patterns of annoyance. You humans insist on doing things your way, disregarding millennia of established protocol. The Arcadian crisis was resolved with what you called a potluck dinner. And no one died, Diana responded, her voice carrying a steel edge beneath its warmth. Unlike the last 6 crises handled through proper channels, which cost millions of lives. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments, translation matrices struggling to keep up with the cacophony of alien languages. Diana watched as species that had been mortal enemies just years ago now argued side by side, united in their frustration with human diplomatic methods. In its own way, it was almost beautiful. Vex slammed his ceremonial staff against the chamber floor, restoring order. We will now vote on Resolution 847-B, the immediate expulsion of Earth's ambassador and a formal demand for a replacement who will adhere to proper diplomatic protocols. The holographic voting matrix materialized above the chamber. Diana watched as thousands of lights turned red, votes for her expulsion. The Arcadians, at least, voted in her favor. They developed quite a fondness for Earth's music during their crisis negotiations. The Proximans, despite their protests, abstained, their energy matrix pulsing with uncertainty. Resolution passes, 4,892 to 87, with 21 abstentions, Vex announced with poorly concealed satisfaction. Security, escort the former ambassador from the chamber. As crystalline security drones descended from their docking stations, Diana straightened her uniform and addressed the chamber one final time. Before I go, I feel obligated to remind the Council of something that seems to have been forgotten. Earth joined this community by choice, not necessity. We sent diplomats like me, as a courtesy. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled delegates. You're about to learn why that courtesy was a gift you should have cherished. The chamber had grown unnaturally quiet. Even Vex seemed unsettled by her tone. What do you mean? Asked the Arcadian representative, their crystalline form vibrating with concern. Diana smiled sadly. Earth's diplomatic corps operates on a simple principle, speak softly first. I was the soft voice. She turned to leave, then added over her shoulder, my replacement, Admiral Harrison Vale, is what comes next. I suggest you review the classified files from the Centauri incident. You know, the one that made an entire warrior species choose exile over conflict. The doors sealed behind her with a resonant boom, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. In the quiet, a junior delegate's voice could be heard reading from their data terminal, Admiral Harrison Vale, designation, the silencer. Status, classified. Warning, access to full service record restricted under Galactic Safety Protocol Omega. The color drained from Supreme Counselor Vex's scales as the implications sank in. They had just refused humanity's extended hand of friendship. Now they would meet the fist they'd never wanted to see. In orbit above Earth, a matte black vessel that seemed to absorb both light and hope began powering up its engines. Admiral Harrison Vale stood on his bridge, reviewing Ambassador Reeves' final report. "Set course for the Galactic Council," he ordered quietly. "It's time they remembered why we sent diplomats in the first place." The Galactic Council's ancient records chamber was never meant to be accessed in haste. Its quantum crystalline walls, designed to preserve the collective memory of 100 civilizations, hummed with displaced energy as archivists broke seal after seal, overriding millennia-old security protocols. Chief Archivist Zaraval, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with anxiety, interfaced directly with the central archive matrix. Around her, junior archivists from a dozen species worked frantically to process the data stream she was uncovering. They had exactly 6 hours before Admiral Vale's ship would arrive, 6 hours to understand what they were about to face. "Found something," announced Zaraval, her voice resonating through her crystalline environment suit. Temporal stamp matches, the Rigel confrontation. Supreme Counselor Vex, who hadn't left the archives since ordering this emergency search, slithered closer. "The Rigel confrontation? That's just a myth used to scare younglings. A cautionary tale about humanity?" Zaraval interrupted, her tendrils flaring. "Observe." The archive's holographic display flickered to life, showing grainy footage that had somehow survived centuries of storage. A massive fleet of warships, their hulls bearing the distinctive biomechanical architecture of the now-extinct Krell Empire, surrounded a small human colony world. "Standard extinction protocols," Zaraval narrated, reading from the accompanying data. "The Krell Empire, at the height of their power, decided to make an example of one of humanity's first extrasolar colonies. Their fleet numbered over 3,000 ships. We all know how the Krell Empire ended," Vex said dismissively. "They disappeared almost overnight, and good riddance too." "They didn't disappear," interrupted a new voice. All eyes turned to Elder Historian 9TL, one of the preservers, ancient beings who had witnessed much of the galaxy's recorded history. The Elder's crystalline form cast prismatic shadows as they floated into the chamber. They ran. The hologram shifted, showing a single human vessel approaching the Krell fleet. "Admiral Vale wasn't the first of his kind," the Elder continued. "Before him, there was Admiral Marcus Chen. The Krell demanded the colony's surrender. Chen responded with a request for parley. The footage jumped, corrupted by time. When it resumed, the Krell fleet was in full retreat, their formation shattered." "What did he show them?" Vex demanded, his scales pale with anxiety. "The records are heavily redacted," Zaraval replied, her tendrils twisting in frustration. "But we found this." She brought up a final transmission from the Krell flagship. "We have witnessed their potential unleashed. We choose exile over awakening it further. Let the galaxy know, do not provoke humanity's wrath. What they show you first is mercy." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Krell, a species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, had chosen self-imposed exile after a single encounter with one human ship. "There's more," Zaraval announced, her voice trembling. "The Centauri incident, the Helio standoff, the 3 days of silence, each time, humanity sent a diplomat first. Each time, they were ignored. Each time, they sent someone like Vale. And each time," Elder 9TL added, "the species involved either sued for peace immediately or removed themselves from galactic affairs entirely." A junior archivist burst into the chamber, their anti-gravity field flickering with agitation. "Council members. We've decrypted Admiral Vale's service record. His designation isn't the Silencer, that's a mistranslation. In human military terminology, he's called the Last Ambassador," Vale's voice completed from the chamber entrance. Every being present froze, their various biological and mechanical systems registering shock. The Admiral stood in the doorway, his black uniform absorbing the archive's ethereal light. He hadn't been due for hours. Somehow, his ship had crossed dozens of light-years undetected. How? Vex began. You dismissed Ambassador Reeves because she didn't follow protocol, Vale said quietly, walking into the chamber. Because she preferred conversation over ceremony, understanding over procedure. He stopped before the holographic display, now showing images of peaceful diplomatic meetings interspersed with recordings of species choosing self-imposed exile. She was humanity's way of offering friendship. I am humanity's way of demanding respect. What do you want? Elder 9TL asked, their crystalline form dimming with apprehension. Vale smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The same thing Ambassador Reeves wanted: peace, cooperation, understanding. The only difference is, she asked nicely. He turned to face the assembled council members. I don't ask. The archive's quantum crystalline walls seemed to pulse with the weight of history, as the galaxy's most powerful beings realized they had mistaken humanity's greatest kindness for its greatest weakness. Now then, Vale said, straightening his uniform. Shall we discuss Ambassador Reeves' reinstatement? The Council's emergency chamber had never been used for a history lesson before. Yet here they were, 5,000 of the galaxy's most powerful beings, watching as Admiral Vale interfaced with the chamber's holographic systems. Supreme Counselor Vex had insisted on calling this session, though everyone could see his scales had lost their usual luster. You think you know the story of humanity's first contact, Vale began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. Your histories record a peaceful exchange, a moment of enlightened cooperation. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. The holographic display sprang to life, showing Earth circa 2157. A massive ship of clearly alien origin hung in orbit, its crystalline architecture marking it as belonging to the Arcturian Confederation, humanity's first contact. The Arcturians chose to approach us peacefully, Vale continued. A wise decision. But not everyone agreed with their choice. The image shifted, showing a second fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel, the warships of the now-extinct Drachnid Imperium. Their organic metal hybrid vessels bristled with weapons, their very design speaking of conquest. The Drachnids believed any new spacefaring race should be subjugated immediately, Vale explained. They didn't want peaceful contact. They wanted to make an example of us. Elder 9TL's crystalline form pulsed with recognition. The lost fleet, they whispered. We always wondered what happened to them. Vale nodded. The Arcturians tried to intervene diplomatically. The Drachnids responded by opening fire on their ships. The hologram showed the brief, brutal exchange. Several Arcturian vessels erupted in crystalline explosions before they could even raise their shields. What the Drachnids didn't know, Vale continued, his voice growing quieter, was that humanity had already detected both fleets. While the Arcturians approached openly, we prepared quietly. The hologram zoomed in on Earth's dark side. Hundreds of small, stealthy vessels emerged from hidden bases. But instead of charging into battle, they simply waited. We introduced ourselves to the galaxy by saving the Arcturians, Vale said. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, we were centuries behind both species. We did it by showing the Drachnids something they'd never seen before. The hologram showed a human transmission being broadcast to the Drachnid fleet. The council chamber's translation matrices struggled to keep up with the rapid exchange that followed. The Drachnids demanded our surrender, Vale narrated. We responded by showing them our history. Every war. Every conflict. Every time humanity had faced extinction and emerged stronger. We showed them how we fought, not just with weapons, but with everything we had. How we'd turn entire planets into weapons if we had to. How we'd sacrifice everything to protect our own. The hologram showed the Drachnid fleet's reaction. Ships began powering down weapons, breaking formation, retreating in what could only be described as panic. Their own records called it staring into the abyss, Vale said. They saw what humanity was capable of if pushed too far. They saw what we could become if they forced us to. And they ran. The chamber was silent as the hologram faded. Vale turned to face the assembled delegates directly. That day, humanity made a choice, he continued. We chose to be better than our potential for violence. We chose diplomacy, understanding, cooperation. We sent people like Ambassador Reeves, people who genuinely wanted to build bridges, share meals, learn songs, and make peace. His expression hardened slightly. But we never forgot what we could be if forced. That's why Earth maintains the diplomatic shadow protocol. For every ambassador extending a hand in friendship, there's someone like me, waiting in the darkness. Not because we want to fight, but because we want you to understand the value of choosing peace. A junior delegate, their mechanical appendages clicking nervously, raised a manipulator. The humans have two faces, they said, their translation matrix struggling to convey the concept. The diplomat and the warrior. Vale shook his head. No. We have one face, survivors. Sometimes survival requires extending trust, sharing meals, learning to laugh together. Sometimes it requires reminding others why that's the better choice. He gestured to the now empty holographic space. The Arcturians understood. That's why they remained our closest allies. The Drachnids understood too late. And now you have a choice to make. Supreme Counselor Vex uncoiled from his position, drawing himself up to his full height. What choice would that be, Admiral? The same choice every species gets, Vale replied calmly. Accept our hand of friendship freely offered, or learn firsthand why we prefer to send diplomats first. The chamber erupted in worried whispers as Vale's words sank in. They had dismissed humanity's friendliest face. Now they faced its most serious one, and the weight of that mistake was becoming increasingly clear. The Galactic Council's primary defense grid went dark at precisely 0300 hours Standard Galactic Time. No alarm sounded. No warnings flashed. The most sophisticated security system ever created simply stopped. Impossible, whispered Chief Security Officer Rin-Exe, their crystalline fingers dancing across holographic controls. The grid is isolated. Independent. Nothing can. Check your auxiliary systems, Admiral Vale suggested calmly from his position at the chamber's center. He hadn't moved, hadn't touched anything. Yet somehow. Rin-Exe's expression shifted from confusion to horror as screen after screen went dark. The secondary grid, tertiary backups, they're all disabled, Vale finished. 17 minutes ago. Supreme Counselor Vex's scales rippled with barely contained panic. How? Our systems are the most advanced in known space. Are they? Vale walked to the chamber's main display, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Humanity has been part of this council for 73 years. In that time, Ambassador Reeves and her predecessors attended 6,412 technical committee meetings. They shared meals, told jokes, learned names. He typed a brief command, and the chamber's screens lit up with schematics, the defense grid's complete architecture. And quietly, carefully, they learned everything about how you protect yourselves. Elder 9TL floated forward, their crystalline form pulsing with realization. The informal meetings, the cultural exchanges, were genuine offers of friendship, Vale confirmed. And also opportunities to understand you better. Every shared meal was a chance to learn your perspectives. Every casual conversation revealed something about how you think. You were gathering intelligence, accused a mechanoid representative, their optical sensors flaring red. No, Vale corrected softly. We were learning how to protect you from yourselves if necessary. Humanity has a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. He gestured, and the defense grid hummed back to life. Your security systems are now operating at 143% of their previous efficiency. Ambassador Reeves identified several critical vulnerabilities during a tea ceremony last month. We fixed them while proving we could bypass them. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Some delegates demanded immediate military action. Others called for diplomatic restoration. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Vale waited for the chaos to subside before speaking again. You're wondering why I'm telling you this. Showing you this. His gaze swept the chamber. Because you need to understand what humanity has been doing while you dismissed our methods as primitive and informal. He pressed another control, and the chamber's screens filled with data, trade routes optimized during casual conversations, diplomatic crises averted over shared meals, technological breakthroughs achieved through cultural exchange programs. Everything Ambassador Reeves did, every protocol she ignored, every informal gathering she arranged, served two purposes, Vale continued. First, to genuinely build friendship and understanding. Second, to ensure that if that friendship was ever rejected. He let the implications hang in the air. A junior delegate, their anti-gravity field flickering with distress, spoke up. You could have conquered us at any time. Vale's expression softened slightly. No. We could have destroyed you at any time. Conquest isn't humanity's way. Protection is. Protection? Vex demanded, finding his voice again. From what? From the real threats, Vale replied. The ones that lurk between galaxies. The ones that your precious protocols and procedures aren't ready for. The ones Ambassador Reeves was quietly preparing you to face together. He brought up one final display, long-range scans showing something massive moving in intergalactic space. Something that defied all known scientific principles. That's why we sent our friendliest face first, Vale said quietly. Because humanity has seen what's coming. We know what's out there. And we know that survival means standing together. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just been making friends, they'd been building alliances, strengthening defenses, preparing the galaxy for something bigger than their petty political squabbles. So, Vale concluded, shall we discuss Ambassador Reeves' reinstatement? Or would you prefer to face what's coming alone? In the greatest irony of galactic history, the Council's vote to reinstate Ambassador Diana Reeves took place over what humans called breakfast. The formal voting chambers lay empty while 5,000 representatives gathered in the station's largest dining hall, sharing Earth-style pancakes and coffee. Admiral Vale stood by the window, watching the gathering with quiet satisfaction. Behind him, the vast window showed his ship in dock, its light-absorbing hull a reminder of paths not taken. They're beginning to understand, Elder 9TL observed, floating up beside him. Though some required more convincing than others. Vale nodded toward where Supreme Counselor Vex was reluctantly trying his first bite of maple syrup-covered pancake. The counselor's scales flickered with surprised pleasure at the taste. Humanity learned long ago that real diplomacy happens in small moments, Vale said. Breaking bread, sharing stories, learning to laugh together. The protocols and procedures your council cherishes? They're walls, not bridges. And the entity approaching from intergalactic space. 9TL's crystalline form pulsed with concern. Is it truly as dangerous as you implied? Vale's expression grew serious. We call them the Void Dancers. They don't invade spaces, they unmake them. Ambassador Reeves has spent the last decade building the foundations for a unified defense, disguising it as cultural exchange programs and trade agreements. The Elder's form dimmed slightly. And we nearly destroyed all that preparation because we couldn't see beyond our own traditions. The chamber's main doors opened, and Diana Reeves walked in, still wearing her Earth diplomatic uniform. The assembled delegates fell silent, then, one by one, began to applaud, a very human gesture they'd learned from her. Ambassador, Vale greeted her with a small smile. Welcome back. Admiral, she returned warmly. I trust you didn't traumatize them too badly. Only as much as necessary. He gestured to the gathered delegates. They've approved the Enhanced Defense Initiative, all of it. Even the parts we hadn't formally proposed yet. Diana raised an eyebrow. The parts that require sharing military technology. Combining fleet commands. The ones that took me 3 years of dinner parties just to hint at. Amazing what a little perspective can accomplish. Vale's smile faded. The Void Dancers crossed the last detection boundary 2 days ago. We have 18 months. Diana nodded, straightening her uniform. Then we have work to do. She turned to address the gathered representatives, her voice carrying easily across the now quiet chamber. Distinguished delegates, friends, family. Today we begin the real work. Not as separate species bound by protocols, but as a unified galaxy facing a common threat. She gestured to the star-filled window behind her. Out there, something is coming that doesn't care about our differences. It doesn't respect our traditions or honor our protocols. It knows only consumption and unmaking. But together. She smiled, and several delegates found themselves smiling back. Together, we are about to teach it something humanity learned long ago: the universe's greatest force isn't destruction. It's the power of many, standing as one. Vale watched as the delegates began to mingle more freely, barriers of species and protocol forgotten in the face of shared purpose. A mechanoid representative was teaching a crystalline being how to properly hold a coffee cup. 2 historically opposed species were sharing a plate of pancakes, their translators working overtime as they discussed joint defense strategies. Was it worth it? Elder 9TL asked quietly. Showing them your capabilities? Revealing humanity's true face? Vale considered the question, watching as Diana moved through the crowd, greeting each delegate personally, remembering names and preferences and small details that made each feel valued. We showed them both our faces, he corrected. The hand extended in friendship, and the fist held ready to protect that friendship. They needed to understand that humanity's kindness wasn't weakness, it was a choice. And now they understand why we choose it. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, while in the darkness between them, something ancient and hungry approached. But for the first time in galactic history, it would find not a collection of separate civilizations bound by rigid protocols, but a unified force guided by human determination, protected by human strength, and bound together by something more powerful than any treaty: shared meals, shared stories, and shared purpose. The galaxy was about to teach the Void Dancers a lesson about the true meaning of civilization, one pancake breakfast at a time. The end.